Well, this is surely going to ruffle some feathers. I already know it. I can sense, I can smell, I can envision the comment section of this one. It's gonna be pretty sweaty. Because today what we're gonna do is go over to the ESPN's NHL Championship Contenders Mirror article. And yeah, that's right, I said mirror article, as in like, you know, the thing, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? This piece was published by Neil Payne earlier this week on the 17th, and the title and graphic say this: How this year's Stanley Cup contenders mirror past winners. It's a very unique premise for an article. Honestly, I don't even think I've seen something like this before. Comparing championship caliber teams from this year's NHL playoffs to championship teams of the past? Yeah, it's kind of weird. Now, spoiler alert, they don't go over every single team in this year's NHL playoffs. They only go over 10. 1 to 10, the first comparison, for example, the Carolina Hurricanes. They have a plus 600 odds at winning the Stanley Cup. They're most similar to the 1999 Dallas Stars championship winning team. So if you scroll down all the way past a bunch of the other ones here, you absolutely know we had to do it. We had to go out there and talk about my favorite team, the Vancouver Canucks, because not only are they listed on this article, but they're actually listed as the number 10th team. So they do have the 10th best odds out of every team included here of winning the Stanley Cup. At a plus 1600, the Vancouver Canucks are 12th in ELO and number 5 in GAR. And if you head over to the analysis over here, the article writes that the Vancouver Canucks are the most similar to the 1998 Detroit Red Wings. Their Cup calling card is a strong core at both ends. Now, before we go over and read what this article has to say, let's talk about just the numbers here. 1997-1998, the league was starting to slow down in terms of its overall goal scoring. There were some offside rules that changed the game, and plus the New Jersey Devils had started doing their trap in the mid-90s, so this is sort of when the dead puck era was in full flight. You can see the point production in 1997-1998. Steve Yzerman led the Red Wings with 69 points in 75 games played, followed up by Nick Lidstrom, who had 59 points in 80 games, Brendan Shanahan, who had 57 points, and Vyacheslav Kozlov, who had 52, tied with Larry Murphy. There are a few Hall of Fame caliber guys here, like if you scroll down, you'll see Sergei Fedorov, who only had 17 points in 21 games played. Now, Fedorov at this time had already accomplished multiple 100-point seasons. You could say the same thing about Steve Yzerman. He had a 130-point campaign a few years before playing this 1997-1998 season. Brendan Shanahan had the same thing with the Blues earlier in his career. And then, of course, the defensemen. Lidstrom, Murphy, so good. And if you scroll down, Vyacheslav Fetisov, a part of this team as well, one of the original Russian 5 guys for the Soviet team who dominated the international scene in the 80s. In the postseason, this is where Sergei Fedorov went alive. He was one of the top guys to produce in terms of playoff points, plus Tomas Holmstrom, Steve Yzerman, of course, Igor Larionov was doing his thing, not to mention Kozlov, so a good diversified skill set. And you also had Chris Osgood in net, who was doing his thing. He wrapped up that season with a .913 save percentage, very, very solid, .918 save percentage in the postseason too. Let's go back over and read what the article has to say here. In a certain sense, the 1998 Red Wings are an odd match for this year's Vancouver Canucks team. That veteran-laden Detroit team was coming off a Stanley Cup in 1997, and they were in the middle of a stretch of consecutive playoff appearances that would eventually run to 25 years. Vancouver, meanwhile, is a younger team that has made the playoffs just once in the previous 8 seasons and has only made a single second-round appearance since losing the finals in 2011. But, regardless of how they got there, the two teams' rosters are constructed in a similar manner. Start with an all-world defenseman, Quinn, Hughes, or Nick Lidstrom, and pair him with another strong D partner, Filip, Hronek, or Larry Murphy, to suppress shots in front of a rock-solid netminder, Thatcher, Demko, or Chris Osgood. Add in talented forwards who play with a mix of finesse, like Pettersson and Boeser, or Steve Yzerman and Slava Kozlov, and toughness, JT Miller or Brendan Shanahan, to power one of the league's top offenses, and the ingredients are there for an all-around championship blend. Now, okay, Neil Payne, the writer of this article, you did not just compare Filip Hronek to Larry Murphy of all people, but you know what? I'm going to go out there and take it. Larry Murphy was an NHL legend, and this season he had 52 points in 82 games played. Honestly, if you wanted to talk about just the point production, I mean, Filip Hronek scored himself a pretty similar 48 points in 81 games played, so makes sense a little bit. But of course, Larry Murphy was an absolute stud of a defender in the 80s and the 90s, multiple Stanley Cup championships. He had 4 to his name, and Murphy maxed out as a 70-point, 80-point defenseman with the Pittsburgh Penguins before finding himself in Detroit in the first place. So, yeah, it's kind of a interesting comparison to be made here, but I still think it's a fun one. Quinn Hughes getting compared to Nick Lidstrom is interesting. It's one of those comparisons where, sure, you could talk about magnitude of importance for the team. I think that's fairly comparable between the two players, but stylistically, they do not play the same at all. Lidstrom did not have the finesse and mobility in the offensive zone that a Quinn Hughes has. Quinn Hughes did not have the overall shutdown defensive ability that Lidstrom has. Lidstrom and Hughes are both captains of their teams, which I guess you could say is another comparison over there, but Lidstrom wasn't the captain until 06-07, nearly a decade after the Red Wings Stanley Cup Championship victory in 1998, which is being referred to here. Lidstrom then started to produce multiple 70-point seasons shortly after this 1998 championship win, but up until this point, he maxed out as a 67-point defender with the Detroit Red Wings in 1995-1996, again, right near the beginning of the dead puck era. Quinn Hughes has already gotten himself a 92-point season this year. Now, if you go over to the other comparisons, I mean, some of these guys are Hall of Fame caliber guys. You have Yzerman, you have Shanahan getting compared to Pettersson and Miller. Honestly, you could make an argument for it. I wouldn't necessarily disagree. Miller and Shanahan is a nice one. I like that a lot. Brock Boeser, though, and Slava Kozlov, that one kind of makes sense as well. Kozlov had 25 goals to be one of the top guys in goals for the Red Wings that season. You could say the same thing about Brock Boeser. JT Miller also produced quite a few goals. For Elias Pettersson, though, if he wants to have that Steve Yzerman kind of impact on the Canucks heading into the postseason, he's going to have to step up big time. I mean, Yzerman was an absolute monster, and we all recognize the talent that he had. He's one of the top players of all time. Elias Pettersson, though, is coming into this postseason with a fairly limited sample of production, and a lot of people saying that he needs to be better. He has not been himself lately, and I think that was pretty evident in the Winnipeg game yesterday, where he refused to shoot the puck when he had a really good lane to the net, instead opting to pass it off to the side. He's been playing like that quite a bit over the past few weeks. It's kind of concerning. Definitely not Steve Yzerman-like. Now, if you go over to the goaltending here, this is where things get interesting, because if you talk about the scene of the NHL in 1997-1998, this is, of course, as we had talked about, right around when pucks stopped going in as often. And Chris Osgood was one of the top 20 goaltenders in the NHL because of it. His .913 save percentage was tied for 15th overall. Osgood's .221 goals against was also good enough for 14th in the NHL, so while he was a starting goaltender who played 64 games, he was roughly in the mid-tier of the first batch of goaltenders this season. Compare that to Thatcher Demko in 2023-2024, and you'll see that he is literally one of the top 5 guys. Demko was top 7 in overall save percentage, and top 5 if you wanted to include only guys who had more than 23 games played. And if you talk about the save percentage, Demko was also top 10 there. So you could say that he's a little bit of an upgrade here. You could say that talent-wise, Demko has Osgood beat. But of course, I mean, Osgood was a Stanley Cup championship winning goaltender with Detroit. He needed to be as good as he was to win. So for Vancouver, Demko's going to have a similar impact if they want to have success. But I just thought it was really interesting how this article compared and contrasted the Vancouver Canucks of 23-24 to the Detroit Red Wings of 1997-1998, the second of a back-to-back championship victory that was absolutely iconic in the late 90s, with the talent, the star power, the Hall of Fame caliber names, and of course the octopi on the ice. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think about this entire comparison here? Do the Vancouver Canucks compare to the 97 Red Wings, and if not, where else do you think they compare to instead? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this British Ash Rolls 99, and bye.